Okay, fantastic. Well, we have a lot to cover, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us this morning. It's exciting to see such a tremendous interest in this webinar. My name is Jade Pires de Carvalho, and I am the new director for the Kansas Office of Broadband Development. Also joining me today is Deputy Director Melinda Stanley, who many of you have probably worked with on previous iterations of grant programs through the OBD, such as Surge during the pandemic and the Broadband Acceleration Grants as part of the IKE Transportation Plan. So I wanted to give Melinda a minute to introduce herself, and then I will introduce myself and we'll get started.
Well, thanks, Jade. Everyone, good morning. As Jade mentioned, it's nice to see such great interest, and we are so excited to be here with you this morning. I have been here at the Office of Broadband Development through the last 20 months or so, working on any number of broadband-related programs, initiatives, and outreach. So looking forward to doing a lot more of that now that the pandemic has settled. My background has been in broadband technology and a lot of public service in my past. So I continue to enjoy working across the state and look forward, if I haven't had the opportunity to meet you yet, I look forward to doing it. And we look forward to being out where we can meet in person. So back to you, Jade.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, just so everyone knows, I'm very, very new to this role. I started on June 6th, so not quite, I think just about 3 weeks in. However, although I'm new to this role, I have been in the broadband industry for about 7 years. On the provider side, I worked for a CLEC that primarily focused on fiber overbuilding in rural underserved areas of South Central and then later Southwest Kansas. So with some fixed wireless thrown in there, I had a variety of roles during my time at that organization with marketing, sales, public relations, and kind of culminating in government affairs with a focus on rural broadband policy advocacy. Prior to that, I ran a small digital marketing company and did comms for a local economic development organization and was in management for a large corporation. So my entire 28-year career has been on the private side, but I also have 9 years of public service on the municipal level as a city council person. So I live in a town called Hutchinson, Kansas, and I've been on the city council for 9 years. I'm currently serving in my third term as mayor for the city of Hutchinson. So right in the middle of the state. We're kind of in the South Central region near Wichita, if you're familiar with that area. And I'm really excited about being able to kind of branch off from where I live. I currently split my time between Hutchinson and Topeka and have the opportunity to go all over the state from that kind of central area. And in fact, today I'll be traveling to Harper County to meet with the delightful Jill at Canocla and some others in the economic development space. And tomorrow I will be headed to Topeka. On Thursday, I'll be in Manhattan for the Infrastructure Hub meeting, and then Friday again in Topeka. So I'm really eager to get out to all corners of the state and meet with all of you probably after some of these deadlines pass. We'll get into some of the funding opportunities and the deadlines that are coming up, but hoping in the fall to do more of a listening tour with Melinda across the state. So let's go ahead at this point and move on to, one other thing I did want to say. On the private side, my whole life, public in my public service, but my graduate degree is also in public administration with a focus on public policy. So next slide, please. So many of you have been on webinars before and are familiar with the Kansas Office of Broadband Development, but if you're not, the office was established by executive order of Governor Laura Kelly during the pandemic in 2020 to ensure all Kansans have the opportunity to live, work, and compete in a global economy by improving universal access to quality, affordable, and reliable broadband. So we're really here today to invite you to join us in this mission of universal connectivity that includes so much more than what we typically have in the past considered broadband. We've really been focused on the access side. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the nuances and what digital equity really encompasses. So next slide, please. In this webinar today, we're here to really encourage all of the eligible entities to take part in our vision to connect all Kansans. Governor Laura Kelly has indicated a desire to see all Kansans connected by the end of 2026. That is a very ambitious and aggressive goal, but I think together we can do it. And so our role at OBD is really in working together with our partners and in facilitating that connectivity, in answering questions, demystifying some of these federal grant programs, and really just taking your input and answering your questions to meet that goal together. So we're really, we recognize it's going to take an all hands on deck approach. And that's what we're here to ask you for. We want to be a resource, but we're also asking you to be a resource. Like, we need your input, your expertise, and we need you to tell us what your communities need to reach these connectivity goals. So we'll be providing an overview of state and federal digital equity funding opportunities. These are going to be available not just for providers, but also on the municipal and county level for tribes, community-based organizations such as nonprofits, co-ops. So it really is all encompassing, and it's going to take us all to reach this goal. We also want to go over some of the definitions of these broadband terms that may be new to you in the BEAD and other NOFOs. Again, it's not just about access, but inclusion, equity, literacy. So we'll go over those. And then we want to provide some links for you for additional resources and ask for your participation in helping us to collect success stories to see what the offices have been doing to help in your communities, and also how we can do more. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay, so briefly, we'll be going over some of the previous programs that the Office of Broadband Development has administered, talking about our goal to get you to join us on deck, digital equity in connecting all Kansans, talk about the upcoming funding opportunities and programs, again, review some terms, go over some resources, and I want to leave ample time for questions. And speaking of questions, if you have anything you want to add or clarify, please don't hesitate to put that in that chat, and we can address that at the end of the webinar. I think we're going to have ample time because I feel like I'm talking really quickly. Okay, let's go to next slide, please. Okay, so some of you have been participants in the programs that we're outlining right here, but to date, the Kansas Office of Broadband Development has invested about $85 million in broadband infrastructure since 2020. The bulk of that was through a program called SURGE, the Connectivity Emergency Response Grant. If you'll remember that Governor Laura Kelly did allocate $50 million in Spark funds to infrastructure projects that was matched on an 80-20 level with providers to invest $65 million in emergency infrastructure through the pandemic. So that enabled more than 50,000 new connections in areas that were grossly underserved. These were, families who could not participate in remote work, could not participate in remote schooling, could not participate in telehealth during the time that it was needed the most. And I'm really proud of the providers who stepped up and in a very condensed time frame were able to roll out infrastructure needs to these really high need areas. So you can see a little bit of the statistics involved with that program. Again, greater than 50,000 new connections to not just residents, but businesses and anchor institutions, nearly 700 miles of fiber and 200 wireless towers. Also, as part of that pandemic response, Governor Laura Kelly allocated $10 million to what was called the BPAG, the Broadband Partnership Adoption Grant. And this was more on the adoption and affordability side. So there was a recognition that even with the infrastructure passing by each premise, some families did not have the capability to afford a broadband connection, and they did not have the device to take advantage of that connection. And so the BPAG grant really enabled providers to do that work in trying to solve the problem of adoption. So that was kind of on the pandemic response side. Prior to the pandemic, work had been done in the passing of the bipartisan comprehensive transportation plan called IKE to include a broadband component. Everybody recognizes, I think, that Kansas really stands out in the nation as, one of the top 3 to 5 for its physical roads, right? And so there was this idea that maybe within that next iteration of a comprehensive transportation plan, we should also consider our digital roads. And could Kansas also lead the way and lead the nation in that respect? And so a certain amount, $85 million over a 10-year period, was kind of earmarked in IKE for broadband grants that would be administered through the Office of Broadband Development. And that includes $5 million for the first 3 years, $10 million for the subsequent 7. And Melinda was the one who originally spun up the Broadband Acceleration Grant program last year in 2021, and just finished announcing awards for Broadband Acceleration Grant 2.0. So again, many of you on this call have probably been recipients and have participated in that program. Okay, next slide, please. So again, we're asking again for all hands on deck. We really want you to join us on deck, and that's kind of how we are describing this effort to connect Kansans in a way that is equitable, fair, and transparent. It's so much more than providing infrastructure. It's, again, providing all the tools necessary to participate in the economy through that infrastructure connection. Laura Kelly has indicated that she would like Kansas to be a top 10 state for broadband access by 2030. And again, has recently mentioned multiple times that she envisions Kansans being connected, every Kansan who wants a broadband connection, to have that by the end of 2026. So I'm excited about this historic opportunity to work together in that ambitious goal. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Here is where we lay out some of these broadband terms. So many of you are familiar with the NTIA, which is the administering body through the National Commerce Department for many of these grants, especially those coming out of the Infrastructure Act. But there's also an NDIA, a National Digital Inclusion Agency, that focuses its efforts on educating people about the need for digital inclusion and equity, and how that really can transform people's ability to participate in the economy and our democracy. So digital equity is the condition in which all individuals and communities have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our society, democracy, and economy. So when you see that term, again, I just want to emphasize that it's so much more than having a connection. It's being able to use that connection and having the resources to do so. Digital inclusion includes things like an affordable connection, a device to take advantage of that connection, and the skills necessary to navigate the device. So you can, again, I don't necessarily need to read it, but you can see the definition for digital inclusion includes so much more than just the connection. Digital adoption is access plus choosing to be a subscriber to broadband. And typically, the biggest barrier to adoption in the past has been affordability, which is why some of the programs coming out of the FCC and the NTIA and this legislation is so important, because it really addresses the adoption piece and how to make broadband affordable to families who have historically been underserved and unable to take advantage of that service. Digital literacy, an individual's ability to find, evaluate, and clearly communicate information through typing and other media on various digital platforms. So it talks about, it's really speaking to the ability to use your device on the internet to enhance your life, enhance your quality of life, whether that's looking for a job, applying for government benefits, just a wide variety of things. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, again, kind of outlining what digital equity is holistically. There are 4 pillars. So we've talked a little bit about these. The robust infrastructure is probably the one that we are most familiar with, and where the focus of the Office of Broadband Development has been in the past, in kind of shepherding grant funds to make sure communities have.
Yeah, he left it right there.
Left it right there.
Yeah, we didn't move it, so.
I don't know if we can, yeah. Got it. Okay, sorry about that. So again, infrastructure piece, a big part of it, and really why we're so excited to have providers on the call and those who are interested in building out the infrastructure, because as an office, that's not our role. We're really here to work closely with you to facilitate that infrastructure rollout, answer questions, and just provide what you need to ease that process. On the device side, there are multiple programs, and I think, Jen, if you can add the, I think on the next iteration of this slide, it has the different programs that kind of correspond to each of these pillars. There we go. Yeah, so there are many programs coming out, and we're going to go over some of these in the next few slides, but a lot of the programs at the federal level overlap on all 4 of these pillars. So infrastructure, we've talked about. Devices, there are multiple programs that will allow us to grant to subgrantees or organizations for devices necessary to take advantage of a connection. And then the affordable connectivity piece, very important. I'm sure most of you on here on the provider side are participants in the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, which did take over from the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program during the pandemic. If you are interested in applying for grants to this office, you will probably be required to be a participant in that program, because the affordability piece is so critical to bringing digital equity and really bridging those digital divides. And then on the digital literacy side, there are multiple programs coming down the pike federally that provide capacity grants for increasing digital literacy skills. Looking forward to working with community-based organizations, libraries, and nonprofits, schools, and other entities that are interested in furthering those skills. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, this is where it kind of gets exciting. So this is where we start talking about the programs that are upcoming and what you need to do to position yourself to apply for grants through these programs. So firstly, if you will remember, the American Rescue Plan Act, passed last March by Congress, did have a coronavirus capital project fund that was specifically designated for broadband connectivity. There are 3 pieces to this fund, 2 of which will be administered by the Office of Broadband Development. The other one, I think, is being administered by the Children's Cabinet. So the 2 pieces that we will administer are the broadband infrastructure portion of Capital Project Fund and the digital connectivity technology portion of Capital Projects Fund. If you pay attention to NTIA press releases, you may have noticed that last month, the first 4 states, the Treasury Department, who is administering this, it's not the NTIA, the Treasury Department announced its first 4 states awards for the infrastructure piece of Capital Projects Fund, or what we call CPF. Kansas is anticipating that we will be in the next round of Treasury Fund announcements. And in anticipation of that, we have been working hard to craft a program plan that is now in review from leadership for approval, and we will be crafting program guidelines. The reason this is important is because we hope to roll this program out in summer, maybe even next month, depending, again, it's contingent upon Treasury announcement. And what I want to convey to those on this call is that it is important that you queue up projects in your community for this grant program. We are anticipating a 4-week application window, and that is a little bit more aggressive than prior grant programs through this office. But it's important to remember that the need is there now. People need broadband now. The competition for resources as far as supply chain, labor, et cetera, is fierce. And we want to ensure that Kansas is leading the way and rolling out a program so that we do not fall behind and are scrambling for those resources. And so be in contact with your community leaders, the people doing work around digital equity, the people who are in those underserved pockets, and make sure you are ready for when this program launches. Because again, we are hopeful that it will be quickly, and we want those in the provider community and all eligible entities to be aware that the opportunity is forthcoming imminently. And we don't want you to be caught by surprise. So start putting your projects together now. I will say that we have about 83.5 million for this program. So that's substantial, right? Surge is the largest program ever administered by this office, and it was 50 million on the infrastructure side, I mean. And so this will be 83.5 million. We have listed on this slide the eligible applicants, the provider community on the ISP side. We've got municipalities, nonprofits, co-ops. There are a lot of people who will have the opportunity to go after these grants. And I just want to say that our office has a philosophy that if you are interested in solving the digital divide, we want to work with you. Reach out to us if you have questions. We're here to provide technical assistance as we have the capacity to do so. Melinda and I are like a 2-woman show, but we are interested and willing to work with anyone who wants to be a doer and wants to solve this problem. Again, we expect this program, I cannot reiterate this enough, we expect this program to be launched soon, probably next month if all goes well.
Hey, Jade. Can I add a couple things?
Please do.
Yeah. So one of the things that we've learned through some of our other programs is to lay out priorities, right? So not only unserved and significantly underserved communities, but one of the things that we are really leaning in on here are partnerships. So those partnership opportunities, we know with the 4-week application window, you should start before that, right? So we want to encourage you to partner. We also are leaning in on co-investment. So those projects where we know that there's a community need because you are so good at laying out what the need is, but when we see the community is co-investing in that project, it takes it to another level for us from a partnership perspective. So I would encourage you to work within your communities as well. Jade has pointed out the priorities and the urgency, but start working together and collaboratively at that local level, and your application is likely to compete a little better. Not that, I mean, there's around $83.5 million. So we hope to continue to work in those areas that are significantly unserved or underserved. So just wanted to make those points, and these will be last mile projects, but if you may include some middle mile if there's last mile as well. So just wanted to throw those priorities out because the partnership piece and the community investment or co-investment can take a little bit of time.
Yeah, very well said. I mean, collaboration is key, but it's not always quick or easy. So really excited to see what can be done to express the needs of the community as holistically as possible. I will also say that as we develop the guidelines, if when we get leadership approval, we will post those on our website. We would like to have a webinar when that Treasury Award is announced, so that we can go over those guidelines. Really interested in being, again, as transparent, inclusive, open, and fair in this project as possible. So we want everyone to be aware of these opportunities and have the ability to apply if they're interested in stepping up and being a part of the solution. Now, on that second piece of the Capital Projects Fund, the digital connectivity technology, we do not have a date on when that will be available, but I will let you know that we expect about $15 million for that program, and that will allow for devices and digital literacy skills grants. So there are a lot of organizations doing work in that space, and we want to work with you. Again, we aren't here as an office to recreate the work already being done. We want to partner. This is all about partnership, working together, enabling those who are doing great work to further their missions as they contribute to the mission of the Office of Broadband Development, which is, of course, universal connectivity by 2026. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please.
One more point while we're talking about that digital equity portion, that'll be a separate approval from Treasury. So just be aware of that. As we get that first approval, we'll be waiting for the second on the digital equity piece.
But again, you know, in anticipation of that, if you have ideas in mind, start fleshing those out, start collaborating, start working with your community-based organizations that care about digital literacy and have subject matter expertise in that area, so that those projects can be queued up quickly when that announcement is made, whenever it's made. So moving on to what most of you are probably aware of is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or IJA. It goes by there's a lot of alphabet soup in the broadband world. So BEAD is the $42.5 billion piece of the Infrastructure Act that is allocated to states for broadband access. And each state will get a minimum of $100 million. And then based on a formula of underserved premises, we'll get additional allocations. So we do not yet know what Kansas will get, because our allocation is contingent upon completion of FCC maps. If you're in the broadband world, the mapping is always drama. And this is the FCC is undergoing a process to try to make the maps more accurate. And we are anticipating that those maps will be complete this fall. There will be a challenge process to that mapping endeavor. And then following that, everybody will receive their allocation. So that's why we put that the application window is expected spring 2023, because we want to be mindful of some of the political considerations in when that program will come down. We do hope to model it somewhat similarly on other programs that we're administering, so that there is that consistency and people aren't left guessing. That being said, the guidance for that program is slightly different. Many of you may have seen the NOFOs that came down for BEAD, enabling middle mile, and digital equity that came out May 13th. And so they do prioritize fiber and or a wired connection. But again, it's that 100 symmetrical that is being pushed. So I guess the main thing I wanted to make you aware of is that, you know, this 83.5 million that's coming from Capital Projects Fund is only the beginning. There will be more. So continue teeing up those projects, continue working with your communities, because there's a lot of money coming for broadband, and we want to make sure that those underserved and unserved premises are covered under these multiple programs. Now, as far as the Enabling Middle Mile Broadband Infrastructure Grant, that unfortunately is not a formula grant. That is highly competitive, and there's only $1 billion nationwide. You know, we all know, well, some of us know, Kansas needs a robust middle mile program. And so it would be my desire to try to put something together to compete. The application window for that grant, which is also being administered by the NTIA, opened last week, and it, or maybe this week, and it closes in September. So a very quick turnaround, but interested in figuring out a solution for middle mile, because I think it will really enhance our ability to reach those last mile residents, businesses, each and every person in Kansas. So just throwing that out there, and more to come on that program. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So Digital Equity Act programs are the third. We talked about BEAD, Middle Mile, and then Digital Equity Act, third component of that broadband infrastructure piece, or broadband piece in the Infrastructure Act. So each state will get a planning grant for a statewide digital equity plan. The deadline for that is July 12th. So Melinda and I will be putting together an application for that program. And then based on that program, we will also get a capacity grant. And then there will be a competitive piece to the digital equity program as well. So once we apply July 12th, we should receive a digital equity planning grant by September 29th. It says $1 million, but I think Kansas is actually only getting 690,000. But what is so exciting about this program is that is what will facilitate our ability to go across the state, talk with all of you, all of these great organizations doing broadband connection and digital equity work, and see like, what do we need to do to truly bridge the digital divide, especially in these historically underserved areas. So we will be working with, we're really interested in working with everyone. Send us your suggestions, send us any thoughts you have, because I think it's going to take all of our collective expertise and knowledge and experience in working in this space to really get at the solving of this digital divide. So again, we'll be hopefully receiving that grant by the end of September, and we'll then embark on a creation of a statewide plan. It says we have a year to create that. I think it's actually 270 days, so it's about 9 months. That's exciting because we don't have to turn it around and do kind of a haphazard plan. We really have the time to be thoughtful, engage all the different groups involved, and come up with a plan that is going to serve everyone for true equity. Okay, next slide, please. Other federal broadband programs that fall under the Infrastructure Act is there's about $2 million for tribal broadband connectivity. This says, well, okay, this says 1 million, but I think it was 2. Maybe it is only 1. And so we're interested in engaging with the 4 tribes in Kansas and seeing how they could take the best advantage of these opportunities, because, you know, again, speaking to those historically underserved communities, we want to do our best on the outreach and listening to their needs. And it's not just, again, the infrastructure piece, telehealth, distance learning, affordability, digital inclusion. One thing I really wanted to point out is that even though this is listed, tribal is listed as separate. Tribes are eligible to apply for any Office of Broadband Development grant programs in addition to this. So I want them to recognize that Capital Projects Fund, BEAD Fund, digital equity, et cetera, are all available to them. So if you can help us spread the word on that, that would be great. And then the USDA Reconnect Grant Program, which some of the RLECs have really taken advantage of over the years. There's about $2 billion in the Infrastructure Act for that as well. So Melinda, did you have anything to add to those programs?
I would confirm the tribal is 2 billion, and that was a recent ad, right? So there is 2 billion for the tribal, and then USDA, the Reconnect program, does now allow for 100% grants, and it used to be kind of a 50-50 match. Now it's 100% grant opportunity. And that actually there is a window open that just recently reopened for Reconnect. So if you're interested in that from a community level, take a peek at the Reconnect website.
Awesome. And Melinda, something you said spurred another thought, and that is many of you may be wondering, what is the match requirement on these grants? And these program plans are in flux, but I wanted you to be aware that they're going to be set up a little bit differently than in the past. Acceleration grant is a 50-50 match, and that's based on the legislation. Surge was an 80-20. We're really interested in exploring a sliding scale option for broadband grants, which incents providers to go into the most high cost areas by providing a higher percentage public match to their private match. So just so you're aware of that, I want you to be aware of that, because I want you to look at areas you may have ignored in the past because a business case could not be made. But please note that we are cognizant of that market failure and the difficulty in reaching those high cost areas. So we're trying to craft program guidelines in a way that allows consideration of those areas. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, we touched on ACP briefly. Again, the Affordable Connectivity Program administered through the FCC. I think it's about $14.2 billion in the Infrastructure Act. And we're hoping that eventually, once Congress sees the benefit of that program, it will be made permanent. But this is that $30 subsidy to qualifying households. I believe qualification includes up to 200% of poverty level income and any number of, government assistance programs, participation in a number of government assistance programs, so just free and reduced lunch and other programs. So it really is pretty broad. I hope you are all, if you're here on this call on the provider side, I hope you're all participating in that. If not, would love to facilitate that in any way we can help. I also wanted to put in a plug for the Internet for All White House initiative that elevates ACP from being a $30 subsidy to basically being free internet for anyone who is ACP qualifying. And there are many, many providers in Kansas who are participating in that program. Although there's only 20 nationwide, those 20 nationwide account for about 80% of broadband subscriptions. So what that program did, that was a Biden administration initiative that collaborated with ISPs to convince them to provide free broadband, no installation costs, no contract, free broadband to those who qualify for ACP. So you're taking, as a provider, you're taking that $30 subsidy and providing a low-income household with broadband. I know that is a big ask. I get it, especially as a small business, but I'm just putting out a plea for you to consider participation in that program, because I think it will make an enormous difference in the communities that don't have access. Like some of the more urban areas have the larger providers, Cox and AT&T and Charter and Comcast. Those are all participants, but some of these smaller rural providers are not participating. And I don't think it's because they don't want to, but maybe they didn't know about it. So anything this office can do to facilitate your participation in that program, we are interested in doing, because I think it's going to be a game changer for adoption and access for low income families. Okay. Go ahead.
Hey, Jade, I just want to add a couple comments. If there are folks on from municipalities, from school districts, from community organizations, economic development, housing, there's a real opportunity to engage you all in the outreach on affordable connectivity program, opportunities to serve your constituents at the local level, encourage participation at the household level. There's a toolkit linked on our website that you can use. They're pre-created things from social media posts to billing inserts to flyers, posters, any way that you may be able to engage with us to promote that program at the household level would be we would really appreciate your engagement with us on that. So just wanted to make a plea and invite you to participate with us to help extend the reach of the ACP program.
Yeah, very well said. Interested in hearing some of the marketing efforts from providers and in working with schools, maybe through the enrollment process. So yeah, thank you, Melinda, for that. Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, and then this is where we just kind of review the BAG, which is part of IKE, the Broadband Acceleration Grant that again was part of that 10-year comprehensive transportation plan through KDOT. Funded in 2020, 10 years, $85 million. We just wrapped up award announcement of the second round of $5 million grants. And currently that's a 50% match. And we will be administering that program annually again for 10 years. It's currently set up to provide service to areas that are less than 25/3 service. Moving forward, I think we all can acknowledge that that is not an adequate definition of broadband, and we may be looking at seeing if we could change the minimums on that. But for these first 2 years, that's the 25/3 was the threshold for consideration of projects. Okay. Next slide, please. These are just some resources for information about the different grant programs. Most of these you can get on the NTIA website, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration. If you're looking for information on Infrastructure Act programs, I think you can go to internetforall.org. And yeah, so we'll again post this so that you can access these links. And then lastly, I think this is lastly, some more links. Oh yes. Okay. Lastly, we want your stories. So we know that bringing internet to underserved communities can be transformative. And we're interested in elevating the stories of success that you've had from some of the programs we've administered. I just saw a great video from WTC the other day. It was really good. So anything that you have like that, feel free to tag us, and we will make sure that we also forward that message and use it in our own annual report. Really, again, interested in collecting success stories of what worked. So with that, I think what's the next slide is, are we ready for questions? Yeah. Okay. Anybody have any questions or comments? don't know if there are any questions in the chat. I can't really see right now.
Leslie, if you want to unmute. No, we'll see.
Hi, thanks for this great webinar. I have been working on trying to get the word out about the Affordable Connectivity Program. And, you know, we're beating the bushes here in the Kansas City region. But unfortunately, there wasn't any funding for outreach included in the ACP. So I'm just curious if you have any suggestions for how to fund those outreach efforts. Thank you.
Leslie, that is a great question. I think that there are opportunities in these upcoming digital equity grants. But I will just say, when I was on the provider side, we did take it upon ourselves to do that outreach. And I would like to encourage other providers to do so. I know that many of you are out there doing great work. One thing that we did is a one-sheeter that we then reached out to area superintendents to ask be included in the enrollment packets during the August K through 12 enrollment. Just one idea. Again, we're not going to have digital equity funds until later in the year. So I would just put out that plea for providers to maybe work on that. And if we can be of assistance or provide any templates, we would be really happy to do so.
I will drop my email in the chat in case any providers are interested in connecting.
Okay, is it Lizelle? Yeah.
Can you unmute, Lizelle? There.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Lizelle.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Excellent. I was on a webinar a while back with someone from I think the FCC or the Treasury, about the capital project funds. And I think they had mentioned that if you get equipment under the capital project funds, that equipment will remain property of the state. Is that correct?
Well, I'm happy to address that. We, in our work with Treasury, we understand that it would be the subrecipient who would own that. You know, we intend to create a subrecipient grant opportunity in that. So I think it depends, Lizone, like if the state intends to just work with organizations directly, it depends on how the state structures it. But for our state, we intend to sub-grant it, so it would then be owned by the subrecipient.
And I will just add that, you know, we had some concerns about that and do plan to speak with Treasury. I don't think we're going to get that rule changed, but sure would like to grant those devices directly to the homes that are taking advantage of them. I won't editorialize more on that, but I think that is a really good point. And we identified it as an issue, but we'll do our best to administer the funds as the guidance is outlined.
And one other question, do you think that the funds would be eligible to do outdoor wireless networks in neighborhoods where, like low-income neighborhoods, because not every time things are being maybe in a building, but access outdoors for populations who may need to walk up, like there's homeless populations that may need to walk up to a Wi-Fi to handle some of their business or make those type of communications. So in a nutshell, will outdoor wireless type of projects be something that may be eligible for funding as well under any one of these funding streams? Thank you.
Yes, so for CPF, Lizone, we know that that would be an eligible use on the digital equity side of that funding. We have yet to finalize our program guidelines, but we know that it would be an eligible use for
So-
public Wi-Fi.
Yeah, so please be thinking of those pockets of need.
And I
Jan-
see a question from Jancita.
Yes, I was just wondering, of the, in the beginning, you talked about the 85 million in broadband infrastructure investment that was received since 2020. Do you know if any of the 4 tribes of Kansas received any of that allocation of funding for that round?
Yes, there was at least a surge grant that I'm aware of that was up in that area, but because it went directly to the provider that they were working with, Jancita, I'm not sure the extent of that reach, but I'm happy to look into it and follow up with you.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate that.
And while we're on, Jancita, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone on the call, since
Yeah,
I hate to put you in that position, but we're excited that you're here, so.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Jancita Warrington. I am newly appointed to my position, but I am the Executive Director and Tribal Liaison for the Governor's Office. I work in the Office of Native American Affairs, and I'm happy to be here learning a lot about broadband and the opportunities that are coming. And I hope to be able to share these with the tribes and be able to help advocate for some of this funding streams to go to them, or to provide additional trainings for them to be able to apply. So thank you for the information.
Well, we're excited to have the opportunity to work with you and the tribe.
are there additional questions in the chat? Oh, I see that there's someone from Topeka Public Schools that is promoting ACP as part of their registration program. So thank you for that. I think that's key. It's not that K through 12 is the only audience we're trying to reach, but I think it is a big and an important one, especially when we consider things like the homework gap and other data that indicates that graduation rates are lower and other educational outcomes are lower for those without a home internet connection. So really grateful for your work in that space. Are there further questions? Well, I'm glad everyone's going easy on me. My first webinar, I can remember tuning into one of Stanley. If you knew Stanley Adams, I consider myself the new Stan, is how I introduce myself, but he was in this role for a very long time before the office was stood up even. He served as the broadband person for Kansas. And during the pandemic, I was on a Zoom with him and it got Zoom bombed. Does anybody remember that? I remember thinking it was hilarious at the time, but now that I'm in this role, I have a little bit more sympathy for that happening. I would have been mortified. So yeah, I will drop my contact information in the chat. And if you should need anything, I do encourage you to reach out. Again, I will mention that the Office of Broadband Development has many upcoming deadlines. Upcoming deadline for digital equity is July 12th. Deadline for BEAD is in August. Deadline for middle mile application, should we choose to go after that competitive grant, is in September. But after we move past some of that and staff up our office, which is what we are hoping to do, we are wanting to hit the road and hear from all of you what your needs are, how we can help you. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
Hey, Jade, I just want to mention that we will be posting an archive of this session on our website, and we appreciate everyone extending our reach to others that may be interested in participating. And we also send out a newsletter. So if you hit Kansas commerce.gov/broadband. You can sign up to receive our newsletter as well. So we'd encourage you to do that. And then finally, I want to give a couple plugs because this digital equity work is so important. There are a couple organizations that are working in that digital equity space. Leslie Scott and Lizone Grace are two individuals that have been heavily invested in working in that space. So KC Digital Drive, and then the TC Get Digital project with Topeka. So Lizone and Leslie, if you guys want to drop some of the links to your organizations in the chat so people can find you. And Scott Gowan, the CIO with Topeka Public Schools is on. He's part of that group in Topeka. We're just really seeing some phenomenal work going on to reach those that are really underserved and unconnected. So I just want to point that out. And if any of you that are participating in the call know of other projects to make us aware of at the local level, we'd love to know about those as well. Leslie pointed out Esteem Village. We just heard from them yesterday. That is in Kansas City as well. So some exciting work going on to reach Kansas families. So we'd love to continue to learn more about your work and how we can advance that across the state, because we have so many folks that are in need, as Jade so eloquently pointed out. So just encourage that kind of collaboration and ongoing sharing.
Perfect. Okay, any thoughts for the greater good? If not, I will just wish everyone a wonderful end to your week. And thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to working with you together in advancing the mission of universal connectivity for all Kansans. So thank you, and we will be in regular communication.
Nice to see everybody.
Bye.